My name is Joel, and in this Unplugged, I have got Jason Silva. Jason is an Emmy-nominated TV personality, a filmmaker, futurist, public speaker, and philosopher. He hosted the TV series Brain Games on the National Geographic Channel, which was broadcasted in over 170 countries. With Shots of Awe, he presents micro-documentaries on futurism, technology, creativity, metaphysics, and consciousness. To me, Jason is a true artist. Enjoy the moments we captured on camera when Jason and I spent some time together in Amsterdam. What I wanted to ask you, throughout the years you've been exploring many different topics.
Yeah.
Within Brain Games, within Shots of Awe. You've been talking about them, you've been investigating them, you did keynotes about them, interviews. But when you look at yourself now, 2020,
baby.
2020, what is the essence of what you are bringing into the world?
Wow, beautiful question. What is the essence of what I am bringing to the world in 2020? What am I bringing into the world? Okay, well, I recently came across a book. The title by itself really resonated with me, and it was called Technicians of Ecstasy. And it was written by Mark Levy, and basically the book makes the case that artists at their very best are performing a kind of shamanism in their work, that their art is a portal to divination, it is a portal to altered states of consciousness, it is an instigator of contemplative introspection, and it is an attempt to agitate the sleep of mankind. My background is philosophy and film. I love ideas, right? Philosophy means love of wisdom, love of insight, right? Love of divination. And then film is the desire to want to capture in media ecstatic truth, in the words of Werner Herzog. So when I combine those loves, the media that I make reflects my desire to exteriorize moments of divination. So I want to jolt people into awakening, and so I think my contribution is the contribution of an artist, hopefully with a capital A, or the contribution of a poet.
I think it's capital A.
Thanks, bro. and as Alain de Botton, said, a journalist, which I am not, but a journalist may be more accurate in describing the details of an event than a poet. That's still a kind of naive realism, whereas a poet reveals truths of a deeper sort that are beyond the literal grid. But I think we need to draw those boundaries real clear, separate church and state, separate empirical truth versus mythopoetic truth. But don't dismiss mythopoetic truth, because it's equally important. It's the truth that sets you free. It's the truthful fiction, right? It's when fiction is more truthful than reality. And so I take poetic license in my content. I am artistically imaginative in the way that I convey ideas, but I also put a big parentheses around it and say, look, this is art, and it's art that reflects things that are true and things that are imaginary. But as long as I wear the label of an artist, I think I can just get away with sort of stretching my observations and being more elastic in my interpretations of the human condition.
Has your approach as an artist changed throughout time?
Has my approach as an artist changed throughout time? Well, I've been playing with video cameras since 1994. I was 12 years old when I had my first 8mm video camera. I was obsessed with making videos, recording videos, sort of the deliberate and intentional stewardship of reality. And I went to film school because I wanted to make movies, I thought, but I didn't really want to make movies. I wanted to watch movies, and then I wanted to make short form videos in response to the movies that shook me. So I fell in love with short form video early on. And I think it was also good timing because with the advent of the internet and online video and attention spans being fragmented by the sort of constant interruption of so many social media apps and so many platforms competing for our attention, that it kind of fit like a glove, that I was doing short form but highly meaningful content, like super dense, compressed espresso shots of inspiration. But all you needed to give me was 2 or 3 minutes, 4 minutes tops. If you gave me that much, I would impact you. And I didn't know if that was a monetizable thing. I didn't know if that was a legitimate art form, like to call myself a filmmaker for making 3-minute monologues feels a little bit pretentious, but I'll tell you what is true is that a lot of people seem to be getting a lot of nourishment from the work I put out. So that is very fulfilling.
I love your t-shirt. Can you elaborate on your t-shirt in a 2 to 3 minute espresso shot?
Well, not to put myself on the spot, but this t-shirt is the work of my friend Nick Phillip and the Imaginary Foundation. So they basically use t-shirts to Trojan horse psychedelic illumination, mind-revealing illumination. And these Venn diagrams come from a series of shirts that they call the Venn Commandments. Not to do a play on words, but the Venn Commandments is that through Venn diagrams, they're going to make a series of t-shirts that all are pregnant with great truth. This one basically says that between something and nothing, there lies the mystery. How does nothing become something? How does something become nothing again? That is an unending mystery, right? We can sort of deconstruct it scientifically and trace the origin of life, but still there seems to be some flash of divination, some anti-entropic force in the universe that turns inert material into dynamic processes that move towards greater complexity and organization, in a kind of teleological direction. And for me, that's something that I turn to. That's something that I turn to when I need nourishment and an antidote to the realities of the human condition, which also include aging and death.
So how do you take that antidote? How do you sink into that mystery?
Well, I think that reality, subjective reality at least, is coupled to perception. And so our perception dictates the reality that we experience. And finding some kind of agency over our perception of the world, some kind of stewardship of our perception, crafting a story that we tell ourselves and about the world that is self-serving, I think is a functional necessity. Ernest Becker calls it a vital lie. But, sometimes fiction is more truthful than reality. Without the vital lie, you might succumb to the despair of mortality, which at least right now is still an undeniable fact of existence that makes the whole fucking act dissolve into meaninglessness. So you have to craft a story from the ashes of that existential dread. And what is the story that I can craft from the ashes of the despair of mortality? Well, that I am here to make a dent in the universe, that life moves towards greater complexity and organization, that the syntropic or extropic quality of life can eventually overcome entropy, that we can infuse the universe with consciousness, that nanotechnology and biotechnology will become a form of self-divination and self-determination where human beings engender their own godhood. Like, that's a story I can get behind that, for me at least, excites me enough to dampen the terrifying despair of meaninglessness and mortality that afflicts man. So, yeah.
With all you've heard and seen, what would your take on consciousness be? When you look at science, when you look at the spiritual approach, what is consciousness?
Well, there's certain things that are undeniable, and that is that consciousness is mediated by physical processes. You know, my consciousness suffers and is narrowed if I don't get enough sleep. My consciousness becomes a tunnel vision when I'm hungry or my blood sugar is low. My consciousness warps and distorts if I take some cannabis. My perception of time changes, what I notice in the world and my perceptions are heightened. So on that note, it would be unfair, I think, of us to dismiss the physiological underpinnings of conscious experience. It is, I believe, an emergent property, so potentially irreducible in that it's greater than the sum of its parts, but it still emerges from physiological underpinnings, even though at certain moments it seems to transcend those physiological underpinnings. I would describe it as a pattern of information. I kind of fall into Ray Kurzweil's interpretation of being a patternist. He wrote that book called How to Make a Mind, or How to Build a Mind, where he talks about these hierarchy of pattern-making qualities that the brain has. Consciousness offers us, at least, self-awareness. Hofstadter, in his book Gödel Escher Bach, he described the brain as essentially media, hard drives that store patterns that mirror the world, that reflect the world. So we sort of mirror and model the world, and the more complete that model of the world is, eventually it crosses a threshold where the brain's model of the world becomes complete enough to include the observer in the world making the observation of the world. And when that threshold is crossed, it's like an inevitable vortex of self-mirroring whereby a causal I, or a sentient mind, emerges. And he likens it to aiming a camera, plugging it into a television and aiming it at a television, and it creates an engulfing infinity of recursion. And he says that's a really good analogy to imagine, to explain consciousness and the granularity, really, because then you can see that it exists on a spectrum. The greater the amount of self-mirroring, the more conscious a mind can become.
I love that explanation.
Yeah, it's a good one, right? Yeah.
So what do you think, when humanity keeps evolving its own consciousness, together with technology or without technology, what will be the next step in that evolution of humanity?
The next step in the evolution of humanity. Well, first and foremost, Carl Sagan said, for small creatures such as we, the vastness is bearable only through love.
I love it that a scientist like he says something like this.
Yeah, well, he's also a poet. The best scientists are poets. Or the best scientists have the sensibility of a poet. I think that the first thing that we have to really focus on is extending our lifespans. We used to die at 20, then at 30. Life was short, brutish, dark. Now we're pushing 70. So, I think if we were to eliminate physiological disease from the human enterprise through advances in genetics and molecular engineering, biotechnology, that kind of stuff, that would be amazing. In terms of like self-determination, first and foremost, eliminate physiological decay as part of the program. Once we give ourselves more time to cultivate self-development, it will just open endless horizons. It's similar to what the airplane did, you know? It's kind of like before the airplane, the sort of area of adjacent possibility for exploration was this, you know? And then the airplane was like just a whole phase change in adjacent possible spaces for exploration. And I think doing that to our lifespan, whether it's the work of Aubrey de Grey or, you know, once there is a breakthrough that you know, extends our lifespan to 500 years, 600 years, I mean, that would be something. Well, just imagine it. I mean, just imagine it.
I never thought about it, but lifespan is a factor that is inhibiting self-development.
It inhibits everything.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, when are you going to have kids? You know, like, oh, when are you going to start a family? I'm like, dude, but I'm like on a quest for like divination and great truth, and I hate the burden of the 40s and the 50s, the burden that it, like, you have to resign yourself to some final compromise. When I just, you know, I want to fucking, what did Flaubert say? Human speech is but a cracked kettle in which we tap crude rhythms while we long to make music that will melt the stars. So it's like, yeah.
How do you work on your own exploration of your own consciousness?
Well, I kind of, there's sort of a series of steps, and you can't skip a step. So the first step is I have to make sure that I'm physiologically satiated. So self-care, right? You have to sleep well, you know, and whatever demands you have for sleep. A quiet room, a temperature-controlled environment, a place where you feel at ease and at peace to surrender all, so you can get the restorative effects of sleep. Without that, you can't do anything else. Food, feed yourself well, exercise. There's a basic physiological needs that must be satiated before I can indulge in any flights of fancy or consciousness exploration. If you're hungry, the meaning of life is food.
Yeah.
If you're tired, the meaning of life is sleep. I'm hyper aware of those things, because when I hit the ceiling of my biological limitations, when my biological limitations get in, like hunger or dopamine depletion get in the way of further explorations of poetry and consciousness, I get really fucking angry. So I'm humbled into working with my limitations. So sleep, rest, exercise, all those things, and then once those things are taken care of, then it usually gives you, in an average day, like if you rested well, you ate well, you exercised well, then you might have like 5 to 6 hours of pure cognitive indulgence.
When you look back at the last year for yourself, what is the next step that you've taken in your own development, or your major insight that happened there?
When I look at the last year,
Yeah.
I think a big one, increasingly, is to practice self-compassion. I passed the 35-year mark, and so what happens is you start to experience a wistful longing for who you were when you were in your 20s, because there seemed to be a romantic abandon about being in your 20s, in the sense that when you were in your 20s, you had so much time before you were even 30-something. But when you're in your 30s, they're like, you're almost in your 40s. And so I've had to learn to practice some self-compassion, because you start to wonder if you've done the best you could. You're like, wow, I got past 35, like, am I enough? You know, am I impressive? Is my contribution legitimate? And avoid the trappings of comparison to those that are more impactful, more successful, more refined, more cultivated, have more wisdom to share, have more books under their belt, have more followers on Instagram, and all that bullshit. You know, I think the older you get, the more you have to learn to accept yourself, because there's, at least in your mind, there's this perception that like you can't undo things, and you have less time to radically change direction.
That's a big one.
Yeah.
The self-compassion one.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you have a goal for yourself in the next 10 to 20 years? Like that's something that you want to
Do I have a
contribute to,
goal?
or where you want to be? Or are you going with the flow in the here and now?
I try to go with the flow. I mean, that's the way of avoiding the trappings of being caught up in your ambitions, that they blind you from the treasures you have in front of you. I guess I am a fan of momentum. I am a fan of the feeling that you are riding a wave that you have generated with your art. I've experienced that exhilaration several times in my career, where I found myself caught up in the momentum of what I had created, and it became bigger than me. You start to wake up to opportunities rather than have to look for opportunities. Your work is out there seeding minds and creating ideas for projects for you in the minds of others when you're sleeping.
Yeah.
So you're waking up to opportunities. And that's the best feeling in the world, because it finally takes care of the existential anxiety of what do I do with myself? Because you're waking up to opportunities that are so obvious and so easy and such obvious yeses that life becomes much more of a trust fall at that point.
Yeah,
like
the
when a
meaning
musician
comes
jumps
natural.
into the crowd and they carry him, it's like, I know that I go to sleep, all I have to worry about is sleeping well, because I know I'm going to wake up and something exciting is going to be saying, come this way. So I want more of that.
I get that one. Riding the waves of synchronicity.
Yes. Ride that wave of self-generated synchronicity, yes. Yes.
So when you look back, can you see how you self-generate that wave?
How I
Do you-
self-generate that wave?
Do you know the mechanism of
Yes.
self-generation?
Oh yes. So a lot of it has come from avoiding over deliberation and just taking action. And I'm talking about specifically creative action in my opinion, just make the video, do the recording, invest the money, hire the editor, do the thing, do the thing. Rather than be caught up in is there an audience for this, or who's gonna watch this, or can I sell this, or do I need a sponsor for this? I have found that the stuff that has changed my world has come about from me just doing the thing, getting out of my own way, actually being a little more impulsive and a little less guarded. And typically that has happened when I am in states of elation. So I see a relationship between consciousness and action, the state of consciousness that you're in.
And how do you get in that state of elation?
I think the same as the Romantic poets. Romantic poets were less caught up in outlining their poetry than in outlining how to stage a shift in consciousness, and trusting that once they evoked that reverie, the poem would flow. And I think that's definitely true for my work. It's oh, okay, so what I have to design for is the experience that gets me out of my own way.
Yeah.
That's what I have to design for. As soon as I get out of my own way, the good stuff will emerge.
This has been my biggest learning in the last year, that there is no end to this. The more you get out of your own way, the more you get into your own being, out of the doing, the more it will happen for you. And you can always take a next step or next level into that being.
Yeah. At the same time, though, I have a lot of friends who are very gifted minds, creatives, dreamers, sensitive souls, and they're very pure. They're beings. And yet, many of them, at least creatively fulfilling career opportunities are not emerging for them. There is a part of me that has a little bit of a hustler. Even though the hustle is not what has necessarily generated the things, but it has kept me. It has kept me in a state of like seizing opportunities when they were in front of me.
So it's about getting into that action mode as well. Yeah.
Also, it's like let the opportunities come, but when they come, seize them. Right? You still have. There's still a responsibility to have agency and just grab it when the opportunity's there.
And go all in.
Yeah. And that's something that a lot of people who are very passive and wonderful to be around and interesting can also be very frustrated because you're not.
But could it be that on the one hand side you have the people who are the doers, the seizing opportunities, which might not be in line with their surfing the wave, but
that's also a problem.
So you have those kind of people, you have the people who are in their being, but that when those two come together, you have in a way the ultimate life.
100%. I mean, it's Jordan Peterson says, toe the line between chaos and order. Or flow is the Venn diagram between discipline and surrender. To live a life of only discipline and seizing everything can be also constricting, but living a life of total surrender all the time can be a life where you don't ever get anything done. It's like Michael Pollan says, the ego gets the book written. So go have the ego dissolving experiences, but then summon the ego to exercise agency and get the book written and get the project done. I think if I didn't have that part of me as well, then all the content in my videos would have just been moments that I had when I was being, and they wouldn't have gotten recorded, they wouldn't have gotten edited, and they wouldn't have gotten uploaded, they wouldn't have gotten submitted, you know what I mean? Like,
and there would have been people who would have been inspired by what you do. And that inspiration causes the acceleration of others as well, of course.
Correct.
I love it. Thanks, man.
Thank you, Joel.